The knock came at 10:07 p.m., sharp enough to make my stomach drop. I had been halfway through folding laundry in my tiny apartment in Brooklyn, the kind of night where the city feels far away even though it is right outside your window. My phone was face down. My TV was off. I was finally letting myself breathe after another long week of being the person who kept someone else's world from falling apart. No one came to my door this late. Not friends, not neighbors, not even delivery drivers. The second knock was harder. Urgent. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My heart stopped. Ethan Caldwell stood in the hallway, like he had walked out of a different universe and into mine. The billionaire CEO of Caldwell Holdings. The man whose name was on the building I worked in. The man who never arrived anywhere without a plan, a schedule, and a wall of calm around him. But tonight, that wall had cracks. His suit jacket was missing. His white shirt was wrinkled at the sleeves. His tie was loose, hanging like he had stopped caring halfway through tying it. His dark hair was slightly messy, and his eyes, usually cold and focused, looked haunted. I opened the door before I could talk myself out of it. "Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I wanted. "Is everything okay?" He swallowed like the words were hard to get past his throat. "Mia," he said, and hearing my name from him at my front door made my knees feel unsteady. "I need to talk to you." I stepped back, still stuck between shock and common sense. "You should not be here." "I know," he said, and his jaw tightened like he hated every second of this. But I didn't know where else to go. That was the first moment I felt it. Not just surprise, but something sharper, a strange kind of fear. Ethan Caldwell did not get desperate. Not in meetings. Not in negotiations. Not when billion-dollar deals were on the line. He walked into my apartment, and suddenly it felt too small for him. The air smelled like detergent and cheap vanilla candles. His expensive cologne didn't belong here. He didn't belong here. He stood near my couch like he didn't know what to do with his hands. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Do you need me to call someone? Security? Your driver?" He shook his head once. "No, I need you." The words hit me wrong, too personal, too close. I held my arms across my chest, more for balance than warmth. "For what? Exactly?" He looked away, as if even meeting my eyes would make him lose control. Then he said, "The Hawthorne dinner is tomorrow night." My brain clicked into work mode. Hawthorne, classic old money investor. Famous for refusing deals if he didn't like the person behind the numbers. "Yes," I said carefully. "Your calendar is cleared." The venue confirmed. "The guest list is final." Ethan gave a short laugh that held no humor. "It's not enough." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He took one slow step closer. "Hawthorne is traditional. He believes a man's home life is a reflection of his character. He thinks stability in business starts with stability at home." A cold understanding started to form in my chest. I swallowed. "And," quote, "and he thinks I'm married," Ethan said, his voice tight. "He mentioned it to my legal director last week. He said he was excited to meet my wife." I stared at him. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck like he was trying to push away a headache. Apparently my PR team used the phrase, "settled," in a profile last year. Hawthorne took it literally. "Then correct it," I said, trying to stay logical. "Your team can clarify. You can laugh it off. You can say you're private." Ethan's eyes snapped to mine. If I correct him now, he'll assume I lied, or that I'm unstable, or worse, that I hide things because I have something to hide. My heart beat faster. "So what are you asking me to do?" He stared at me for one long second, and I saw something I had never seen on his face before. Fear. "I'm asking you," he said slowly, "to act like my wife for one night." The room went silent, except for the soft hum of my old refrigerator. My mind refused to catch up with his words. "Your wife," I repeated, like saying it out loud would make it less insane. "Just for the dinner," Ethan said. "You'll meet him, you'll be with me, you'll help me make it believable." I shook my head instantly. "No, absolutely not." His face tightened, but he didn't back away. "Mia, listen." "I'm your assistant," I said, trying to control the shake in my voice. "I'm not an actress. I'm not a date. I'm not your wife." Ethan's shoulders rose with a hard breath. "I wouldn't ask if there was another option." "Hire someone," I said. "There are agencies for this kind of thing." "I can't trust a stranger," he replied. "Hawthorne will notice mistakes, and he brings his wife. She reads people like a book." I laughed, sharp and nervous. "And you think I can fool her?" Ethan's gaze didn't move. "I know you can." That should not have made my chest warm, but it did. Then his eyes softened, and his voice dropped lower, like he was saying something he didn't want the world to hear. "I know about your mom," he said. Everything in me froze. My fingers tightened around the edge of my doorframe. "What did you say?" He didn't look proud. He looked careful. "I know she's in assisted living. I know the insurance is not covering everything. I know you've been paying out of pocket for the last 8 months. The air left my lungs. I had never told him, not directly. I had taken extra shifts, skipped lunches, said no to weekend trips with friends. I had tried to keep my life separate from the office. Ethan's face was serious, almost gentle. "I'm not saying this to threaten you." "It feels like it," I whispered. He flinched like I had slapped him. "I deserve that," he said quietly. "But I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to help." I swallowed hard. My throat burned. "Why would you help me?" Ethan's eyes held mine, and for a second, he looked like a man who didn't recognize himself. "Because," he said, voice rough, "you're the only person I trust, and I don't know how to ask anyone else." My heartbeat was loud in my ears. I should have told him to leave. I should have shut the door and locked it, and gone back to folding laundry like my world hadn't just been flipped. But then he said the words that changed everything. "If you do this," Ethan said, "I'll take care of your mom's bills. All of them. Not a loan. Not a favor you have to repay. Just taken care of." My eyes stung. I hated that my first feeling was relief. I hated that my second feeling was shame. I stared at him, trying to find the catch, trying to find the part where this became ugly. Ethan took one step back like he was giving me room to breathe. "1 night," he said. "That's all. After that, we go back to normal." Normal. As if anything about this could ever be normal again. I looked at his loosened tie, the tired shadows under his eyes, the way his hands stayed clenched like he was holding himself together by force. This wasn't a game for him. This wasn't him being cruel. This was him being cornered. I closed my eyes for a moment, and my mom's voice came to me, soft and tired, telling me she was fine even when I knew she wasn't. When I opened my eyes, Ethan was still there, waiting. "Okay," I whispered, and the word tasted like a lie and a prayer at the same time. "I'll do it." Quote. Ethan's shoulders dropped like he had been holding his breath all night. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked just slightly. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and something flickered in his expression that made my skin feel warm. Not relief, not victory, something else, something dangerous. And in that moment I realized I had just stepped into a role that could cost me a lot more than 1 night. The next morning, I could not look at Ethan the way I always had. For 2 years, I had been able to keep him in the safe place in my mind where bosses lived. Demanding, distant, untouchable. A man in perfect suits with perfect control. A man I respected, worked for, and kept a careful distance from. But after seeing him in my apartment, with his tie loose and his voice breaking, that wall was gone. When I stepped into the executive floor at Caldwell Holdings, everything looked the same. Assistants moved quietly. Phones rang. Coffee carts rolled past glass offices. The city spread outside the windows in cold silver light. Still, nothing felt the same. At exactly 8:30, my desk phone buzzed. "Come into my office, please." His voice was calm again, clean, controlled, like the man from last night had never existed. I stood, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward his office on legs that did not feel steady. His assistant chair across from the desk was already set out. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. Ethan stood by the window with a black folder in his hand. He turned and looked at me for half a second before setting it on the desk. "We need to prepare." I sat down slowly. "Of course." He opened the folder and pushed it toward me. Inside were pages of notes, dates, places, small details typed in neat bullet points. I stared at them. "This is our story," he said. I looked up. "You made us a story." His mouth tightened. "We need one." I looked back down. "We met 18 months ago at a fundraising gala in Manhattan. We started dating quietly because of workplace concerns. We married 6 months ago in a private ceremony in Connecticut. We kept it secret because we valued our privacy. Favorite restaurant, Bellamy House, Upper East Side. Weekend place, a lake house in Vermont. I let out one breath, slow and thin. You really thought of everything." I had to. He said it like a business problem, something to solve and move past. But my chest felt strange reading those words. A fake first date, a fake wedding, a fake life. He walked me through the details like he was preparing for a negotiation. His tone was steady, his expression gave nothing away. But then he said, "You'll need to wear a ring," and my fingers curled tightly in my lap. He noticed. For just a second, his eyes softened. "I know this is a lot." I met his gaze. "Do you?" Silence stretched between us. Then he nodded once. "Yes." That was the first honest moment of the morning. I looked back at the file and turned a page. "This part won't work." He frowned. "What part?" "All of it," I said. His jaw tensed. "The timeline is solid." "That's not what I mean." I stood and closed the folder. "A woman like Mrs. Hawthorne is not going to test us on dates and restaurants. She's going to watch how we look at each other. She's going to notice what happens in the quiet moments." Ethan said nothing. I took a breath. If we act like two people reading from a script, she'll know. His eyes stayed on me, sharp and unreadable. I kept going, because now that I had started, I knew I was right. You can't fake marriage with facts, Ethan. You fake it with small things. The way you touch my hand, the way I answer before you ask, the way we stand close without thinking about it. Something changed in his face then. Not anger, not pride, respect. I felt it move between us like a door unlocking. "So what do you suggest?" he asked quietly. The answer came before I could stop it. "We need one real evening first." His brows pulled together. "What?" "If you want this to look believable tomorrow night, then tonight we stop being boss and assistant." I held his gaze even though my heart was beating hard. "Take me to dinner. No work talk, no script, just dinner." His stare stayed on me, and the whole office seemed to disappear around us. "You're serious," he said. "Yes." A long pause followed, then he gave one slow nod. "All right." That night he came to my apartment again. This time he arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, dressed in a dark charcoal suit that made him look unfairly handsome. He held no file, no tension-filled folder, no desperate expression. Just a single white rose. I opened the door and forgot how to breathe for a second. His eyes moved over me slowly. I had worn a simple black dress I had owned for years. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive. But the look on his face made me suddenly aware of every inch of my skin. "You look beautiful," he said. No man had ever said it to me in a voice like that. I took the rose from him, and our fingers brushed. A tiny spark moved up my arm. The restaurant he took me to was small, warm, and quiet. Candlelight. Soft jazz. No one there seemed to know who he was, and I could feel him relax because of it. For the first 10 minutes, we made the mistake of falling into work. "You need to review the Benson contract tomorrow morning," I said. "You should remind me before the car arrives," he answered. Then I laughed and shook my head. "We're doing it again." He gave me the smallest smile. "We are." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay, new rule, no office." He raised one brow. "Then what do we talk about?" "Something real." His expression changed at that word. I picked up my water glass, just to give my hands something to do. "Tell me something no one at work knows about you." He looked at me for a long moment, almost like he was deciding whether I had earned that answer. Then he said, "Before my father got sick, I wanted to design houses." I blinked. "What?" He gave a quiet laugh, but there was sadness under it. "Not office towers, not hotels. Homes. places people actually lived in. I used to sketch floor plans in college. He looked down at the table. Then my father's heart failed, and all of that ended. I stared at him. This man had spent 2 years as a machine in my mind. Sharp edges, no softness, no wasted motion. But now I could see the younger version of him, a man with dreams he had buried under duty. "That must have hurt," I said softly. He looked at me then, really looked at me. It did. Something in my chest ached for him. He set down his glass. "Your turn." I smiled faintly. "Mine is less impressive." "I doubt that." I looked down, suddenly shy. "I want to open a bakery one day, somewhere small, maybe upstate. Somewhere with wooden tables and pies cooling in the window." He did not smile at my dream the way some people did. He listened like it mattered. "What would you call it?" he asked. I laughed softly. "I've had about 10 names over the years." "And your best one?" I hesitated, then admitted, "Sweet Haven." He repeated it under his breath, like he was testing how it sounded. Sweet Haven. The way he said it made it feel less like a silly dream and more like something real. By the end of dinner, something had changed between us. The air was easier, warmer. We were still careful, but no longer strangers standing on opposite sides of a desk. When he drove me home, neither of us rushed to speak. At my door, he stood close enough that I could catch the clean scent of his cologne, close enough that I noticed the faint shadow on his jaw and the tiredness still hiding behind his eyes. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "It helped," I whispered. "Yes," he said. But the way he looked at me told me he was not talking only about the dinner. I should have gone inside then. I should have smiled politely, said goodnight, and ended the moment. Instead, I stayed. So did he. His hand lifted slowly, almost carefully, and brushed a piece of hair back from my face. My breath caught. His fingers lingered for one dangerous second near my cheek. "Mia," he said, and my name sounded different in his mouth now, lower, warmer. Then he dropped his hand and stepped back, like he had almost done something reckless. "Good night," he said, voice rough. He turned and walked away before I could answer. I stood inside my apartment a minute later with my back against the closed door, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Tomorrow night, I was supposed to pretend to be his wife. But the part that scared me most was not the pretending. It was how real this was starting to feel. The day of the Hawthorne dinner started with rain. Not a soft, pretty kind of rain. It was gray and cold, the kind that made Manhattan look harder than usual. I stood in my apartment that afternoon, staring at the sapphire dress Ethan had sent over, with no note, just a garment bag and a velvet box with a diamond bracelet inside. For tonight. That was all the card said. For tonight. I touched the words with my thumb and felt my stomach twist. Everything about this evening was supposed to be temporary. One performance. One lie. One night. So why did every little thing feel too personal? By the time I finished getting ready, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. My hair was pinned up. My makeup was soft but elegant. The dress hugged me in places I usually tried not to think about. The bracelet glittered at my wrist every time I moved. I looked polished, beautiful, maybe even unforgettable. And that frightened me. At 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed. "I'm downstairs." Just those 2 words. I took one steadying breath and went down. Ethan was waiting beside the car in a black tuxedo, one hand in his pocket, rain falling in fine silver lines around him. When he turned and saw me, he went completely still. For one long moment, he said nothing. His eyes moved over me slowly, and the look in them sent heat rushing straight to my face. Then he stepped forward and opened the car door, but before I got in, he said quietly, "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." It was not flirtation. It was not part of a performance. It was truth. I looked away because I could not survive that look for long. "You clean up pretty well, too." His mouth curved just a little, and for a second the tension broke. The ride to the hotel was quiet but not empty. His hand found mine halfway there, like it had every right to. My fingers fit into his too easily, too naturally. "You nervous?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. He looked at our hands. So am I. That surprised me enough to make me glance up. Ethan gave a small laugh. You thought I was made of stone? Usually, I said. He squeezed my hand once. Not tonight. Quote, the Hawthorne dinner was being held in one of those old Manhattan hotels that smelled like money and history. Crystal chandeliers, white flowers, men in tuxedos, women in silk and diamonds. Everything gleamed. The second we stepped inside, Ethan's entire posture changed. He became effortless, smooth, controlled, powerful, but his hand never left the small of my back. That was where it stayed as he guided me through the room, introducing me to board members, investors, and people I only knew from headlines. Every time someone looked at us, they smiled, as if we made perfect sense together. And the worst part was, maybe we did. Then, I saw them, Richard and Eleanor Hawthorne. He was silver-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of man who probably missed nothing. She was elegant in a deep wine-colored gown, with a soft smile that somehow felt more dangerous than his stare. Ethan's hand pressed slightly against my back, a silent warning or comfort. Maybe both. Richard, Ethan said smoothly as we approached. It's an honor. Richard Hawthorne smiled and shook his hand. Caldwell, good to finally see you again. Then his gaze shifted to me. And this must be your wife. There it was, the moment everything depended on. I smiled and held out my hand before I could lose my nerve. Mia Caldwell, it's lovely to meet you. Eleanor took my hand instead of Richard, her fingers warm and light. Her eyes stayed on my face a second longer than necessary, and I felt she was measuring not my dress or jewelry, but my soul. You're even lovelier than I imagined, she said. I smiled. That's kind of you. Dinner began, and somehow we survived the first course. Ethan played his part perfectly. He filled my water before I asked. He leaned toward me when he spoke. He brushed his thumb over my knuckles under the table once, and the tiny touch nearly destroyed my ability to think. I answered questions carefully. Where we supposedly met, why we kept things private, why I did not attend more public events. Every lie felt dangerous. Every glance from Eleanor felt like she could see straight through me. And yet she kept smiling. Then, halfway through dinner, she turned toward me and asked the question that nearly ended me. What made you fall in love with him? My fork stopped in my hand. I could feel Ethan still beside me. Not moving. Not breathing. There was no prepared answer for that. No bullet point in the folder. No fake timeline that could save me. I turned my head and looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who had come to my apartment desperate enough to ask for help. The man who had told me about the houses he never got to build. The man who listened to my bakery dream like it mattered. The man who touched me like I was precious and dangerous at the same time. And suddenly the answer came to me, simple and terrifying. It was the way he made me feel seen, I said softly. The whole table seemed to go quieter. I kept my eyes on Ethan as I spoke. He lives in a world that moves fast, hard, loud. But when he looks at me, it never feels rushed. It feels like he notices everything. My throat tightened, like I matter. The words were too honest. I knew it the second they left my mouth. Eleanor's smile changed. It became softer, warmer. Richard nodded once, as if satisfied, but Ethan just stared at me. There was something in his eyes I had not seen before, something deep and shaken and raw. The rest of the dinner passed like a blur after that. At one point, there was music, a slow live piece drifting across the ballroom, and Richard laughed that a man should dance with his wife at least once during an evening like this. I looked at Ethan. He stood and offered me his hand. The ballroom floor felt too bright, too open, but once his arm came around my waist, the rest of the room disappeared. We moved slowly, carefully at first. You did well, he murmured. So did you. His hand tightened slightly at my back. No, Mia. What you said at the table. His voice lowered. You meant it. I swallowed. We're still performing. That wasn't a performance. My heartbeat stumbled. I looked up at him. Ethan. He guided me through one turn, his expression unreadable. Say it was a lie, and I'll stop. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The music wrapped around us. His hand was warm. His body was close. The room around us blurred into light and shadow. "I can't," I whispered. He stopped moving for half a second. Then he leaned closer, just enough for no one else to hear him. Neither can I. Every part of me went still. I could barely breathe. "What are you saying?" He did not answer right away. He just looked at me like a man standing too close to the edge of something life-changing. Then he said the one thing I was not ready for. "I think I crossed a line a long time ago." The song ended, but neither of us stepped apart immediately. We were standing too close, breathing the same air, with a room full of people around us, and not one of them mattered. Then Ethan seemed to remember where we were. He straightened, the mask sliding back into place. He walked me off the dance floor and out through a set of open glass doors to a quiet terrace above the city. Rain had stopped. The skyline glittered in the dark like another world. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan turned to me fully. "This was supposed to be one night," he said, voice low and rough. "That was the deal." "Yes, but I can't go back to normal after this." My heart was beating so hard I thought he might hear it. "What does that mean?" He stepped closer. "It means I don't know how to be your boss after wanting to kiss you all evening." The words hit me like fire. I should have said something sensible. I should have reminded him who he was, who I was, how dangerous this was. Instead, I whispered, "Then don't." That was all it took. His hand came to my face, careful for only a second before he kissed me, not politely, not like a performance, not for Richard and Eleanor Hawthorne or any deal or any lie. This kiss was real from the first second. It was everything we had been holding back. It was heat and relief and weeks of tension breaking open. I held onto his shoulders because I had to hold on to something, and he pulled me closer like he had wanted to do it for a long time. When he finally lifted his head, we were both breathing hard. I stared at him, stunned, shaken, undone. He touched his forehead to mine and closed his eyes. And then, in the quiet after the kiss, he whispered the words that should have made me happy. But instead, they terrified me. I don't think I'm pretending anymore. I did not sleep that night. After the kiss on the terrace, Ethan drove me home in a silence that felt heavier than anything we had said. The city lights moved across the window like blurred stars, and I sat with my hands locked tightly in my lap, trying to slow my breathing. He had kissed me like a man who meant it. Not for the deal, not for the Hawthorns, not for the lie. For me, and somehow that made everything worse. Because if it had only been part of the act, I could have walked away from it. I could have told myself it meant nothing. I could have put it in a box labeled mistake and moved on, but it had meant something. Too much. When the car stopped outside my building, Ethan came around to open my door. Rain still clung to the street, making everything shine under the lamps. He stood in front of me, his tuxedo slightly wrinkled now, his hair touched by the night air, his eyes fixed on my face like he was trying to memorize it. "Mia," he said softly. I shook my head before he could say more. "Please don't." His face changed, not anger, hurt. I hated that I had put it there. "I can't do this right now," I whispered. "I can't stand here and act like I know what happens next." He looked down for a second, then back at me. "Neither do I." The honesty in his voice almost broke me. I stepped back toward the entrance. "Good night, Ethan." He did not try to stop me. "Good night, Mia," he said, but the way he said my name followed me all the way upstairs. By Monday morning, the office felt cold again, too bright, too polished, too normal. I walked in telling myself I would keep things professional. One night was over. The deal was done. Whatever had happened between Ethan and me had to stay outside those glass walls. But when I stepped onto the executive floor, I knew at once that something was wrong. His office door was closed. It was never closed. People moved more quietly than usual. My desk phone was blinking with missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. There was tension in the air, the kind that spread through a workplace before anyone said the words out loud. Then Noah from legal approached my desk. "Mia," he said carefully. "He's in a meeting with the board." My stomach tightened. "Why?" Noah hesitated. Richard Hawthorne advanced the deal, but he added conditions. Cold moved through me. What conditions? He lowered his voice. He wants Ethan to make some changes. Fast expansion, staff cuts, closing smaller regional branches to boost margin before the merger is finalized. I stared at him. Ethan would never agree to that. That's the problem, Noah said. He walked away before I could ask more. For the next 2 hours I tried to work, but my mind was trapped in the room behind that closed door. I knew Ethan. For all his ruthless reputation, he was not careless with people's lives. He did not cut workers just to impress investors. He carried responsibility too heavily for that. At noon, his office door finally opened. Board members came out first, stiff-faced and silent. Then Ethan stepped into view. One look at him and my heart dropped. His tie was gone. His sleeves were rolled. He looked furious, exhausted, and more alone than I had ever seen him. His eyes found mine across the room. "Inside," he said. I followed him into his office and shut the door behind me. He stood by the window, hands on his hips, looking out over Manhattan like he wanted to tear the whole city apart. "What happened?" I asked. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. Apparently success comes with a price tag. I waited. He turned to face me. "Hawthorne wants me to become a version of myself I have no interest in being." I swallowed. "And the board?" "They want me to smile and do it." The anger in his voice was real, but under it was something worse: weariness, disappointment. The heavy sound of a man learning exactly how much power can cost. He looked at me for a long second, then his gaze dropped. I almost said yes. That shocked me more than anything. He saw it on my face and nodded once. For about 5 minutes this morning, I thought maybe that was what winning looked like. Bigger company, bigger reach, more money. My father's name stamped on something even larger. He let out a slow breath. Then I thought about who I'd become to get it. His eyes lifted to mine again, and the room felt suddenly too small. "And?" I asked softly. And I couldn't do it. Relief moved through me so fast it nearly made me weak. Ethan looked at me with an expression I could not quite name. "You know what changed?" I said nothing. "You?" My heartbeat stumbled. He took a step closer. "A week ago, I would have signed anything if it meant closing the deal. I would have told myself it was strategy. Necessary. Smart." He shook his head. "Then you came into my life in a way I didn't expect, and suddenly all I could think was, what kind of man brings light into someone else's world while destroying dozens of other lives for profit?" I could not speak. He came closer again, close enough that I could see the storm in his green eyes. "I walked away from the terms," he said. "If Hawthorne pulls out, he pulls out." I stared at him. "You would risk all of it?" Quote, "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "For your employees?" I whispered. His gaze held mine. "For myself, for the company, for the people who trusted me." Then his voice lowered. "And for the woman who made me remember that success means nothing if I can't respect the man in the mirror." Tears burned behind my eyes before I even understood why. He reached out slowly, like he was giving me time to stop him, and brushed his fingers against my hand. "Mia," he said, voice rough. What happened on that terrace was real. I looked away because it hurt too much to hear. "That's the problem," I whispered. "It was real for me too." Silence. Then he said, "Why is that a problem?" Quote, I laughed softly, but it came out sad, because I know how stories like this go. He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means men like you don't end up with women like me." He went still. I had not meant to say it out loud, but now that I had, I could not stop. "You live in penthouses and private clubs and boardrooms where every decision changes a market. I take the subway to work. I compare grocery prices. I call my mom every night and pretend not to notice when she forgets things she used to remember." My throat tightened. "You and I had one beautiful, confusing week inside a lie, and I don't know how to make that survive real life." Ethan stared at me like the answer should have been obvious. Then he crossed the space between us and stopped only when we were inches apart. "Real life," he said quietly, "is the only place I want you." I looked up at him, and the truth on his face nearly undid me. He took both my hands in his. I don't care where you came from. I don't care that your dream is a bakery, and mine used to be houses I never built. I care that when I am with you, I feel like myself without all the armor. His thumbs moved gently over my skin. Do you understand how rare that is for me? My eyes filled. He kept going, steady and sure now. You think this is impossible because I'm rich and you're not. Because I'm your boss and you're my assistant. Because the world likes simple lines between people. His voice softened, but nothing about the way I feel for you is simple. My breath caught. He leaned down slightly, his forehead almost touching mine. I don't want one perfect fake night. I want hard mornings and real conversations and your bakery dream and your mother asking me too many questions. A tiny smile touched his mouth. I want all of it. One tear slipped down my cheek. He wiped it away with his thumb. I am in love with you, Mia. There it was, no ballroom, no terrace, no performance, just truth in daylight. The words opened something inside me that I could no longer hold shut. I love you too, I whispered. The second I said it, his eyes closed, like the words hit him somewhere deep. Then he kissed me. This kiss was different from the one on the terrace. That one had been fire. This one felt like surrender. It was warm and deep and full of everything neither of us had known how to say until now. I held on to him like I had been trying not to for days, and he held me like he had finally found the place he was meant to be. When we finally pulled apart, I was still trembling. He rested his forehead against mine and let out one quiet laugh. I should probably tell you something before the office starts a betting pool. Despite everything, I smiled. What? I'm not going to be your boss anymore. I blinked. What? He stepped back just enough to look at me properly. I already called legal this morning. If this became real, and I wanted it to be real, then it had to be clean, professional, fair. His expression turned serious. If you still want to work at Caldwell Holdings, you can transfer anywhere you like. Different floor, different team, different city if you wanted. Or if you want something else entirely, I'll support that too. I stared at him. You already thought that far ahead? His smile was small but real. I spent all weekend trying not to. A laugh broke through my tears. Then there was a knock on the door. We both turned. Noah cracked it open halfway, looked at our faces, and seemed to understand far more than he let himself show. Hawthorne's office called, he said. He's keeping the deal. Ethan frowned. What? Noah almost smiled. Apparently refusing his terms impressed him. He said he prefers a man who knows where his line is. I stared. Noah added, also, Mrs. Hawthorne says she was very fond of your wife. The word wife hung in the room, and something warm and embarrassed moved through me. Noah closed the door again, leaving us alone. For a second, Ethan just looked at me. Then he smiled in a way I had never seen before. Free, bright, almost boyish. Well, he said softly, that's unexpected. I laughed, still half crying. Your fake marriage really worked out. He stepped closer and slid one arm around my waist. I'm not interested in fake anymore. The office beyond the glass walls kept moving, phones ringing, people talking, elevators opening and closing, new deals, new problems, new days. But inside that room, everything had changed. I looked up at him, at the man who had knocked on my door asking me to pretend, not knowing he was walking straight into the truth. And for the first time since all this had started, I was not afraid of what came next. Because this time, it was not a role. It was us.